곧 행사가 시작될 예정입니다. The event will start soon. Hello, thank you for joining our 2020 International Forum and Korean Traditional Performances. My name is Eun-hee Gu, the Secretary of NUACSF, and I am honored to be an MC of this event. This event is co-hosted by the National Unification Advisory Council, San Francisco Chapter, NUACSF, and the Consulate General of the Republic of Korea in San Francisco. This event will be divided into two parts. First part is International Forum led by Dr. Ki Uk-shin and 3 distinguished panelists. And the second part will present a video of the Korean traditional performances provided by the Korean National Kugak Center. First of all, there will be a national ride. Please all arise and face the flags in the screen. 국기에 대하여 경례. 바로. Next, we will have a silent moment for the forgotten heroes. 일동 묵념. 바로. Please take a seat. Next, Mr. John Sung-woo Choi, the president of NUACSF, will make an opening remarks.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome everyone joining us tonight for the Grassroots International Forum for the Restoration of the Crisis and Peaceful Unification of the Korean Peninsula, co-hosted by NUAC San Francisco chapter and Consulate General of the Republic of Korea in San Francisco. And I sincerely thanks to four great panelists, Dr. Ki-wook Shin, So Kim, Joseph Yoon, and Barbara Demick. My name is John Sung-woo Choi, President of the National Unification Advisory Council, San Francisco chapter. We are confident that today's forum for peaceful unification will serve as an early resumption of the peace talking to the Korean Peninsula. Dear everyone who loves peace on the world, we want peace on the land of Korea. For the peaceful land, we need all of your help and support to declare an end of war to the Korean Peninsula and co-host the 2032 Seoul Pyongyang Summer Olympics. Please participate in this process to make Korean dreams come true. And I'd like to express my sincere thank you to all for joining us tonight. Also, special thanks to Seung-hwan Lee, Secretary General, Seok-hee Kang, Director General of the NUAC, and all other staff members. Also, thanks to the NUAC San Francisco staff members for their dedication to prepare this event. The NUAC San Francisco chapter will work more harder until establish a peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. Please stay in safe and healthy during this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Choi. Next, we will play a video of Mr. Seung-hwan Lee, the Secretary General of NUAC, for his congratulatory remarks.
샌프란시스코 자문위원 및 동포 여러분, 그리고 미국 시민 여러분 반갑습니다. 민주평화통일자문회의 사무처장 이승환입니다. 먼저 코로나19 확산으로 인해 어려운 상황임에도 불구하고 한반도 평화통일에 대한 공감대 확산을 위해서 온라인 평화통일 국제포럼 및 한국 전통문화 공연 프로그램을 준비해 주신 샌프란시스코 협의회에 감사드립니다. 2019년 9월 1일 출범한 19기 샌프란시스코 협의회는 최성호 협의회장님을 중심으로 어려운 코로나 환경 속에서도 다양한 사업을 추진해서 미주 지역협의회의 모범이 되어 왔습니다. 특별히 이번 행사는 풀뿌리 평화공공 외교를 위한 민주평통과 외교부의 협력 사례로서 매우 큰 의미를 갖고 있습니다. 행사 개최를 위해 물심양면으로 지원을 아끼지 않은 샌프란시스코 총영사관에도 감사의 말씀을 드립니다. 오늘 포럼에는 한반도 문제 최고의 전문가들이 참여하셔서 북한, 한미 동맹의 전략이라는 주제로 발표 및 토론을 진행해 주시고 계십니다. 포럼의 좌장을 맡아주신 신기욱 스탠퍼드 아태연구소 소장님과 패널로 참여해 주시는 김숙 전 대한민국 유엔 대사님, 조셉 윤 전 미 국무부 대북정책 특별대표님, 바바라 데믹 전 LA 타임즈 기자님께 깊은 감사를 드립니다. 아무쪼록 이번 국제 포럼을 통해 자문위원 및 동포 여러분 그리고 미국 시민 여러분들이 현재 위기를 극복하고 다가올 미래에 선제적으로 대처할 수 있는 지혜를 얻으시기를 기원합니다. 민주평화통일자문회의 의장이신 문재인 대통령께서는 최근 유엔 연설을 통해 한반도 평화는 동북아 평화를 보장하고 나아가 세계 질서의 변화에 긍정적으로 작용할 것이며 그 시작은 한반도 종전선언에 있다고 강조하신 바 있습니다. 민주평통은 또한 최근 한반도 종전선언 촉구를 위한 민주평통 추진위원회를 구성해서 체계적이고 효과적인 한반도 종전선언 촉구 운동을 추진해 나가고 있습니다. 자문위원 및 재외동포 여러분들께서도 한반도 종전 선언을 위한 평화공동 외교에 힘을 모아주시기를 당부드리며 미국 시민 여러분들 또한 한반도의 항구적 평화 구축을 위한 한반도 종전선언 노력에 많은 관심과 지지를 부탁드리겠습니다. 또한 한국 정부는 동북아의 평화를 추구하고자 2032년 서울 평양 공동올림픽 개최 유치를 위해 노력하고 있습니다. 세계인들이 올림픽을 통해 서울과 평양을 동시에 방문하고 즐기는 진정한 평화의 가교를 잇기 위한 노력입니다. 동포 여러분과 미국 시민 여러분께서도 한반도가 화해와 번영의 시대로 전진할 수 있도록 함께 힘을 모아주시기를 부탁드리겠습니다. 아무쪼록 이번 온라인 국제 포럼 및 한국 전통문화 공연이 힘든 시기를 함께 이겨내고 있는 여러분들께 더 큰 위로와 용기가 되기를 기원합니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. Next, I will invite Mr. Kwang Yong-jung, Deputy Consul General of the Republic of Korea in San Francisco, to give a welcoming remarks.
President Choi Sung-woo and the New York San Francisco chapter members, distinguished participants, and dear guests. On behalf of the Korean Consul General in San Francisco, I would like to warmly welcome all of you present here today to this wonderful event. My special thanks go to Professor Gi Shin, Ambassador Kim Soo, Ambassador Joseph Yoon, and former LA Times Bureau Chief Barbara Demick for sharing your valuable time and your insights on this important topic at this critical moment. Today's topic is North Korea and the US-ROK alliance in 2021. The years 2018 and 2019 were full of hopes for peace on the Korean Peninsula, as can be seen in the Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games and the summit meetings between South and North Korea and the United States. However, in 2020, progresses have not been made as much as we had hoped for. Rather, more attention was given to the US presidential election race because the election result will influence the future of Korea in many ways. Last week, President Moon Jae-in and President-elect Joe Biden had a phone conversation and agreed to closely cooperate in relation to the North Korean nuclear issue and COVID-19 as well. Next year, we expect many changes and challenges. However, through the in-depth discussions like today, we will be more informed, we will be more prepared for the future challenges, hoping that the year 2021 will be a turning point for the future of the Korean Peninsula. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Jung. This is the end of the opening ceremony, and I will invite Dr. Ki-Uk Shin to moderate this international forum. You can write your questions on the Q&A box so moderator can see and combine them to ask to the panelists in the Q&A session. Before transferring a microphone to Dr. Shin, let me introduce him briefly. Dr. Shin is the director of the Walter H. Shorenstein Asia Pacific Research Center, the William J. Perry Professor of Contemporary Korea, the founding director of the Korea Program, a senior fellow of the Freeman Spokane Institute for the International Studies, and a professor of sociology at Stanford University. Please welcome Dr. Shin and three honored panelists.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hu. Good evening, everyone. I'm so honored and happy to chair today's session, which is very important and also really timely. So today I'm not really working as a director of Shorenstein APAC, but rather as a fellow Korean American citizen in the Bay Area. So we really have a star lineup for the panel this evening. So I'm going to introduce our three panelists this evening. So first, Ambassador Kim Suk. I think many of you in the Bay Area know him already quite well. He was Deputy Consul General in San Francisco some time ago, and he'll spend some time with us at my center as well. So he really had a distinguished career as a Korean diplomat, serving as ambassador to UN. Also, he represented ROK to six-party talks in dealing with North Korean issue. Also, he was first deputy director for National Intelligence Service. Currently, he's now executive director of Ban Ki-moon Foundation for a Better Future. Our second speaker is Ambassador Jo Yoon. He also had a distinguished career as American diplomat for many decades. He was a political minister at the U.S. Embassy in Seoul. He was also ambassador to Malaysia, and he served as a special rep on DPRK for the State Department. And he worked as commentator on CNN. So I'm sure many of you saw him on TV. He's now working as a senior advisor for Asia Group. Our third speaker is Barbara Demick, who is a prize-winning journalist and author. So she was bureau chief of LA Times in Seoul and also Beijing. So she wrote a really top book on North Korea, say Nothing to Envy, Ordinary Life in North Korea. I believe it was translated into Korean. And if you haven't read her book, then please find a copy and read. Actually, our center awarded her book and herself for our journalism awards some years ago. Now, I believe she's working on project on North Korean human rights. Okay, so briefly about the format for today's panel. Each panelist will be speaking for 5 or 6 minutes. And then we will engage a conversation among us. And then we'll take some questions from the audience. So if you have any question, please send your question through Q&A tab on Zoom. You can write either in Korean or in English, and then I'll pick some of them, and then we'll discuss. So without further ado, let me now turn to our panelists. So Ambassador Kim, you wanna go first?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Shin. Good morning, everyone. And of course, good afternoon to those who are in West Coast. My special greetings to the offline participants in San Francisco as well. The international community extols the Vice President Biden's victory with positive anticipations for a future and hope. And US allies and friends are looking forward to rebuilding multilateralism and rules-based liberal internationalism. On the other hand, I would think that Kim Jong-un is scrutinizing every word spoken by the president-elect far more keenly than any other state leaders in the world. Past records indicate that North Korea has provoked almost every time there was a change in administration in the US or in South Korea. There's a possibility that North Korea will provoke this time again by testing ICBM or SLBM that were disclosed last October 10th. I hope China has put pressure on North Korea to abstain from doing provocation. On North Korea's denuclearization, Trump's denuclearization efforts have failed. 2 US-North Korea summits taught us that North Korea never gives up on the nuclear arms of its possession. President-elect Biden said, I quote, "With North Korea, I will empower our negotiators and jumpstart a sustained, coordinated campaign with our allies and others, including China, to advance our shared objective of a denuclearized North Korea," unquote. Obviously, shared objective is achieving CVID, but there are some members in the Democratic circle, I believe, that point out the need of the interim agreement as a middle step to achieve the ultimate goal. The US could be tempted to reach an interim agreement if North Korea does not make any provocation. However, I would think Japan would oppose this idea because it has the risk of acknowledging North Korea as a de facto nuclear weapons state. The current Korean government would welcome any form of agreement if there is. There should be reviews on the format as well, if it happens, so-called bilateral or multilateral. A bilateral format has a merit of being more focused and systematic. It is the kind North Korea prefers. But it can make China the hidden sponsor of the North, which is the negative factor in this format. Under a multilateral format, well, so-called six-party talks, China would likely chair the talks, but maybe unacceptable for the US this time around. And North Korea rejected the six-party talks some time ago. In terms of food situation, North Korea is in better shape than during the arduous March in the mid-90s. But because of the aggravated economic situation in North Korea, people are distressed, and their growing grievances are putting political burdens upon Kim Jong-un's shoulder. Against this background, we could presume that North Korea may aspire to have negotiations with the US. On ROK-US alliance, it is expected that the Biden administration will make attempts to ease anxiety of Korea and preemptively shut out China's approach to Korea by rendering the extended deterrence, reaffirming the stationing of US forces in Korea, and through swift finalization of defense burden sharing negotiations. However, regarding the operational control transfer, OPCON transfer, President Biden seems to focus on making the decision based on conditions rather than timing. The OPCON transfer is unlikely to happen within President Moon's term. The Biden administration would request resuming the joint military exercises next year. President Moon Jae-in would not welcome this idea very much. South Korean government may be enchanted by the early summit meeting between President Moon and President Biden. My advice is do not hasten. Meticulous policy coordination on a working level should always come first. It would be good if members of senior Biden national security team visit Korea early on after inauguration. Korea joined the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, RCEP, which is one of the pillars of the trade order that China has established since 2012. The Biden administration is likely to join the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, led by Japan and Australia. Korea is currently not a member of the TPP. Korea has to take an active role in multilateral forums in the region by joining the CPTPP, Quad Plus, and Biden's Global Summit for Democracy next year. I'll stop here.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Kim. Now let's turn to Ambassador Jo Yoon.
Thank you very much, Professor Shin, and many thanks for National Unification Advisory Council in San Francisco for having us as a Korean American, I'm delighted that we have our National Unification Council doing this. Let me tell you, my family left Korea in 1964, and I was in what we call grade school, 초등학교, 국민학교 at that time. And I still remember, I only remember two songs from my grade school days. One is 통일은 우리의 소원, unification is our dream. Second one is, of course, the national anthem. And when I visit Korea these days, we seem so far removed from, when I was in grade school. And I'm wondering, what has happened to the idea of unification, to the idea of peace on the Korean Peninsula. So I'm delighted to take part in your forum today. In the US, of course, we are in the middle of a transition from Trump times to Biden. I don't think there is anywhere else on earth that matters, that US election matters so much as in Korea. And because so much depends on what is decided in Washington. My own view, having worked in the US government for over 30 years, is that US policy towards North Korea has been too narrow, much too narrow, and that we need to widen what I call open the policy structure in order there to be any advance in terms of relationship between South Korea and North Korea, as well as US and North Korea, and North Korea in general with American community. What do I mean by widening policy aperture or policy? Number one, we have to accept the reality. And there are two realities we have to accept. One is North Korea has succeeded in having nuclear weapons and their delivery system. They are stronger, certainly stronger than ever before. And so they will not give up nuclear weapons either soon or easily. Second reality we have to accept is that maximum pressure will not work. We've tried it many times before. It does not work. There are many reasons it doesn't work. Among them, North Koreans are too united, willing to suffer all the consequences, and their neighbors, especially China and Russia, are too much willing to help. So what should we do about it? My view is what many of you, including at Advisory Council, would probably agree, which is that denuclearization cannot be the only American goal. American goal has to be denuclearization and peace. That peace must be worked in tandem given the equal status as denuclearization for it to work. When I used to meet with North Korean negotiators, they will begin their long speech, and usually they are very long, with about American hostile policy. And they will end their long speech by saying there will be peace only when hostile policies are removed. Now, I don't exactly knew then. I didn't know then what they meant by hostile policies, but this is something we must get into in terms of their peace idea in order to work with denuclearization at the same time. So I was very encouraged when President-elect Biden said that he wanted principal diplomacy, that he wanted to see Korea united and denuclearized. Those are good goals, excellent goals, but we must have a process, and that process must include denuclearization as well as peace building.
So, Ambassador Yoon, you are done?
Yes, I'm done. I'm sorry. Was there an interruption?
Yeah, there's a little bit of, I think, glitch, but that's okay. So thank you for your remarks. So now let's turn to Barbara Demick for her remarks. So please unmute.
Thank you very much, Professor Shin, for that warm introduction. I'm delighted to be here and delighted to meet the members online of the National Unification Advisory Council. It's wonderful work that you're doing. I'm going to confine my remarks to the humanitarian situation in North Korea because that is my area of expertise. This story has been dominated in North Korea, as with everywhere in the world, by COVID-19. And, you know, it's strange because North Korea is a country that claims not to have any COVID-19 cases, but they may end up the most devastated by the pandemic. And this is also strange because North Korea is in many ways better equipped to handle a pandemic than other countries by virtue of its unique nature. You know, you don't have North Koreans complaining that their human rights are being violated by having to wear masks, like you see with some Americans. They have been able to close their border with China in a way that no other country could do unilaterally. And they've had to be very strict because the medical system is really devastated. North Korea ranked, I think, 193 out of 195 of all countries nationally in the Johns Hopkins Index of Global Health Security. But this has come at a terrible cost, closing the border. I mean, as this audience knows, the 95% of North Korea's trade comes from China. And closing the border has really wiped out the sources of hard currency, both the licit and illicit sources. It's really been more effective than the best crafted sanctions regime. It's so hurt them. And, you know, it came at a time that the North Korean economy was looking up. I think trade with China was up about 15% last year before the lockdowns. Chinese tourism was booming. I've heard figures of in season 1,000 to 2,000 Chinese tourists a day. I've heard from people who've traveled to North Korea frequently that the hotels and restaurants are just teeming with Chinese tourists. And that's all gone. And then you had the succession of 3 typhoons in August and September. And they wiped out maybe 100,000 acres of agricultural land. They also exacerbated the long-term problems with flooding in the coal mines. And, you know, I've seen several news items that I find very worrisome. There was a report recently that North Korean soldiers were injured laying landmines by the Chinese border along the Tumen River. This is a main crossing point for North Korean defectors. And you know, that indicates that there's some level of desperation because otherwise they wouldn't be cracking down. There was another interesting report recently saying there was a crackdown on the unauthorized manufacture of face masks. And that's another, you know, strange thing because it shows that there's really no economic liberalization in North Korea. And other reports that are troublesome, no cabbage to make kimchi. There's been a ban on the use of grains to make alcohol, which means I guess the parties won't be very much fun. I know quite a few North Koreans. As Professor Shin mentioned, I wrote this book, Nothing to Envy, which is about life in Chongjin. a city in the far northeast in North Hamgyong province. And I stay in touch with the North Koreans in the book. They all live in and around Seoul, and I see them every time I go to Seoul, which most recently was, I guess, in November. And I heard from everybody that the food supply, the electricity was really veering back to the bad old days of the 90s. And I mean, this is very anecdotal, and I hate to say this kind of thing at an academic conference, but I know these people a long time and I trust them. And a few years ago, they had been quite upbeat about the situation improving in North Korea. So, you know, there is great grounds for concern even before COVID-19. Thomas Quintana, who's the United Nations Special Rapporteur on North Korea, gave a report last October saying this, I'll just read an excerpt. He said, "This crisis highlights historic economic hardships facing people in North Korea, worsened by the most severe sanctions regime and increasing numbers of natural disasters. Under this unprecedented situation," he said, "that there's a need to reevaluate the sanctions regime more urgently than ever." And I think this will present an interesting dilemma for President-elect Biden. I mean, obviously, North Korea has not been at the top of the agenda with so much going on in the world. In the United States, we're very distracted. But I think there will be a rethink in many ways about North Korea, especially when it comes to humanitarian concerns and human rights. The human rights really kind of fell off the table the last few years. I mean, it was barely mentioned at the 3 meetings between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. You know, I've heard many complaints. I don't know how justified they are, but I have certainly heard from human rights groups in Seoul that the Moon Jae-in government tries to keep them quiet and has, you know, discouraged independent human rights groups run by defectors inside South Korea. And you know, I'm hoping that when the Biden administration picks up the North Korea portfolio, as Ambassador Yoon said, that they'll sort of widen the aperture, that they'll take a closer look at human rights. And you know, they've been sort of pulling on this string of denuclearization for many, many years. But you know, sometimes approaching things differently and I think elevating human rights, you know, might lead to a better outcome. At least so I hope.
Okay, thank you so much for your remarks. I think a lot of issues are on the table. So I'm going to maybe ask a few questions, and then all of you are invited to make comments. So let me start with North Korean position right now. As you know, North Korea has been pretty quiet before and after election. As Ambassador Kim mentioned, I'm sure they are watching very closely, maybe more than any other country. But what does their silence mean or suggest? Maybe as Barbara Denning mentioned, they are preoccupied with their domestic challenges, or they are disappointed that Trump has lost election, or they may feel quite comfortable, so there's no reason to rush because they continue to amass their nuclear and missile capabilities, and Kim Jong-un had a lot of international spotlight in the past couple of years. So what does it mean? What does their silence mean? So I invite anyone to comment on that question. Yes, Ambassador Kim. Yeah.
Well, what does current silence mean? A couple of days ago, Kim Jong-un presided over the Central Politburo meeting, but he intentionally, or I think it is intentionally, skipped mentioning the recent election and President-elect Biden. I think they are wait and see for the time being, and they need to gather more information about the words the president-elect utters, and what will be the members of the national security team, and what are their mentioned in the following weeks or month. So I think basically they will wait and see. And for the time being, I hope they do not come cross the line and make any reckless provocation. As I mentioned earlier, I hope by now China has already approached North Korea in their own secretive way to abstain from any kind of provocative action toward the new incoming U.S. administration. If there's some kind of provocation, then Biden administration has no option whatsoever but to deal with the strong measures against it. There is no space for conciliatory diplomacy. So I think North Korea is currently waiting and seeing.
So yeah, Ambassador Yoon.
Well, thank you very much. I very much agree with Ambassador Kim. There are, in general, the first thing is North Koreans are quite happy where they are compared to 4 years ago when Trump came in. They are much more recognized worldwide, legitimate, even if I say so, and which is why, as Ambassador Kim mentioned, they were hoping that Trump would win the election. Right now, he has not won the election, but the transition in US is confusing everyone, including you, me, and I'm sure the North Koreans. They're saying, what on earth is going on, and so they are saying, let's not do anything, as Ambassador Kim says, until there is some settling down in Washington. Now, the problem is it's going to take a while for Washington to settle down. First of all, we have to say, somehow transition has to take place from Trump to Biden. And then Biden comes in, and it's going to take few months for the national security team to take place, to take root, have a review of issues. So we're looking from now, maybe 6 months or so until there is a strong signal what Biden administration wants to do. Can they wait 6 months quietly, nicely, like Ambassador Kim? I hope so, but there is a big chance they might not. Thank you.
So, Barbara Demick, any comments you want to add?
My sense of it is that the Biden administration will not react until they're forced to do so. There's just so many domestic concerns in the United States. And I think the issue is, as the other speakers have said, at what point the North Koreans will stage a provocation to force President-elect Biden's hand. I'm not sure that they will use the same playbook as in the past. I mean, I think the economy is in really dreadful shape. I think it's much worse than has been publicly reported, and that they will, maybe even, play the humanitarian card, try to get some sanctions relief, on the basis of the typhoons this summer, of the lockdown, of the border over COVID. I expect things to go a little bit differently this time.
Mm. Okay, then let's turn to South Korea. As you mentioned, this time the transition in the United States will be much more challenging than usual. I mean, for the reason that we all understand. And looks like the Moon Jae-in government, for probably the right reasons, they seem to be quite anxious to move on North Korean issue. So what advice would you give to Seoul during that transition and maybe early days of Biden administration? Because as Joe mentioned, it will take at least like 6 months or so before having team and so on. So what kind of advice would you give to Moon administration? So any of you? Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I would advise, don't be hasty and try to contact on a working level as many and closely as possible with the incoming administration. And recently Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa visited Washington, but nothing was revealed so far on newspaper. But maybe it is too early. But once national security team comes over surface, then I would strongly suggest and recommend that the current Moon Jae-in government approach, or vice versa, each other to make the close consultation. And I would stress that not only the bilateral consultation and coordination, I would think that trilateral coordination, including Japan, would be no less important, as there is a new leadership in Japan by Prime Minister Suga.
Mm. Yeah.
I was very happy to see that President Moon was one of the first foreign leaders to call President-elect Biden to congratulate him. And I think that will be the beginning of a relationship between two leaders. And that is always very, very important, to have the relationship between two leaders. Now, really, I think Trump administration and Biden administration have a little bit different approach to South Korea and Korean Peninsula issues. And let me just highlight three of them. One is, of course, North Korea. There is no way that Biden is going to rush into big engagement like having summit. They will be much more deliberative. So again, as Ambassador Kim Suk says, don't try to rush them too much. Second is on alliance issues. I think there, both the South Korean government and the American government can agree to resolve some very thorny issues, like the payment to station U.S. troops here. They can resolve those quickly and have a better relationship. Last is the region. The region, how Biden administration looks at China and how Trump looks at China is slightly different. And so South Koreans must realize that and position, again, South Koreans to make sure that they are on track with Washington thinking, but at the moment making sure national interests are upheld. And then similarly with Japan, again, Biden administration with its emphasis on alliance will want to see a much closer Japan South Korean relations. And somehow, if South Korea can go some ways to meeting that, that will be a very big plus. Thank you.
So Barbara, any comments?
Yeah, I've been thinking about how this will shake out. We've seen often a kind of a mismatch between South Korean and US politics, when I started covering the Korean Peninsula, you had Kim Dae-jung was president, left of center, then right of center, George W. Bush, and then it, switched over. I think it will be, we don't have so much left of Moon Jae-in, but I think it will be a better relationship. I mean, it's a little bit rude to talk about it, but President Trump has been quoted several times in these tell-all books talking about his distaste for Korea and Koreans. I think there have been some complaints. It may be rude to bring this up, but there was a coinciding of interests between President Trump's desire to make an impact with North Korea and Moon Jae-in's, desire to push forward for a peace agreement. But just because their interests coincided doesn't mean that they liked each other or really were working in tandem. And I've got to think that the situation will be better under a Biden administration.
Okay, so I'm getting a lot of questions and keep sending, and I'll try to combine your question from the audience with mine. I think maybe going back to remarks by Barbara about this question about human rights in North Korea. We know that when Mr. Trump got into office, he invited North Korean defectors to White House and also to his first State of Union speech. But then, as he was like, in a meeting with Kim Jong-un, he, completely dropped this question. And then the Trump administration hasn't refilled the position of a special envoy on North Korean human rights. And I believe that once Biden is in office, I think he's going to fill that position as a special envoy on those kind of human rights. I mean, it might take a little while, and then I think he's going to bring up that issue to North Korea. And this could be a possible source of friction between Seoul and Washington, because Seoul may be reluctant to raise the question. So this could be a fairly thorny question down the road, maybe 6 months from now. So, I mean, do you agree with that assessment or not? And how should we navigate through that possible contentious process? Maybe Barbara, you want to start?
Yes, I saw that Robert King, who was the envoy for human rights under, he was appointed to really work for the UN, but he was appointed by President Obama when President-elect Biden was vice president, and he also predicted that there would be an envoy for human rights. I mean, I think I said this earlier, but the nuclear first, the deal with the nuclear program only approach has not worked. It's always seems to end up at the same dead end. And, I do think a broader approach when you're looking at all of North Korea and the humanitarian situation and the human rights situation, which are really linked together. If we're going to proceed with North Korea and have any kind of diplomatic relations with North Korea, it has to be a North Korea that is somewhat more acceptable as a regime. So I think these things, all go together in one package, and that it's a mistake to ignore human rights. And, just one more thing on human rights. I mean, there tends to be sort of this, great pessimism about human rights in North Korea. Nothing can happen positive, so why even try? But there have been, small, baby steps towards better human rights. I heard a talk by David Hawk recently, who's an investigator of North Korean human rights. They've made progress in small ways. People with disabilities, some women's issues. And, I think it's something that needs to be pursued.
Okay. Ambassador Kim Wol-yoon.
Yes.
So
Well, of course, the denuclearization issue is priority one. We all agree on that. But our perception that denuclearization is the most important thing in our security problem, that does not necessarily mean that we forget about any other things, including human rights issue. So-called human rights is the universal issue that is dealt with on the United Nations dimension. We have seen Otto Warmbier's tragedy. We have seen the very cruel North Korean regular army killing and burning the South Korean civilian officers. So this is something that we should not put aside as to deal with the denuclearization issue. I think we should stick on this human rights issue as well as humanitarian issue that will I would contribute and to the easily or I would think we're pursuing a human rights issue will be contributing to also in other area resolving the denuclearization issue.
Joe?
yeah, thank you very much. I mean, for me, when we say open the policy aperture, as Barbara says, I think we need to make something, just not make it political. The real problem with both humanitarian assistance and human rights issues is we have made them political, which is when we want to put pressure on North Korea, we use these as sticks. And when we want to deal with them, we use these as carrots. They should be neither human rights nor humanitarian assistance, should be neither carrots nor sticks. They should stay put. We should give them humanitarian assistance regardless of how the other negotiations are going. And we should be observing or pressing them on human rights regardless of how nuclearization talks are going. By making them political, we have essentially made them nothing. And to me, that's a serious mistake. And so one of the things I would say is human rights and humanitarian assistance have their own track, and they will continue. Everyone should be allowed to provide humanitarian assistance regardless of what Kim Jong-un does, because that it should be non-political. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Also, question from audience. I'm combining. We know that many people are quite critical of the North Korean policy by Mr. Trump. Some people speculate that Biden might pursue anything but Trump, just like G.W. Bush did after Clinton administration. So the question is there anything useful to build on, what Trump has done? For example, a lot of criticism about the summit. It's a reality show and, Photoshop, nothing has been achieved. But at the same time, one can argue that through the summit, we came to know more about the North Korean leader, the regime. Their intention, their thinking. So there's something maybe positive. So what would you suggest? Do you think, is there anything we should build on what Trump has done rather than trying to destroying whatever he has done for the last 4 years? Any comments?
Well,
Okay.
I'm trying to be a little provocative. Yeah.
There's a saying in Korea, 타산지석. Yeah. Well, verbatimly translating, it means a stone in other mountain. So we take a lesson from what has been done in the past. I think what 4 years during the Trump administration has taught us is something like 타산지석. First, that well, it confirmed that North Korea will never give up the nuclear weapons of their possession right now. Second, they have tried the top-down format. I have been in this six-party negotiation for a year back in 2008, but I was so frustrated that at the time I thought of the idea, what if we do have the leaders coming into our discussion? Will it help? I had thought of that, but we have tried for the last less than 4 years, but it failed. So from now on, I think top-down idea will be thrown into the trash. And third, we need a strategy, meticulous strategy. During the last 4 years, there was never a such thing to be called a strategy. So I would think that negotiators and strategists get together before the leader, so president, come out and say something or tweet anything else. And during this process, I would think that bilateral and trilateral coordination is utmost important.
Thank you. I think it'd be a very big mistake to throw away everything Trump has done, and which is typically the instinct in Washington to disavow whatever the previous administration has done. I do think they have opened a channel of communication, way of doing things, which are quite valid. And listen, you know, whether you like it or not, it was very different 4 years ago than it is now. Certainly, Trump, you know, if there is ever a meeting between Trump and President-elect Biden, is not going to tell Biden that this is the #1 national security.
Right.
Because it is not #1 national security. So you have to give him some credit. If I were advising Biden, I would tell Biden that, you know, nobody wants provocations early. Why don't you send a secret message to Pyongyang saying that you respect the Singapore Summit joint statement? There is nothing bad about it. You know, why not say you acknowledge it, and then that will make Kim Jong-un happy, and so that will open an engagement door that is at the moment looking pretty difficult to open.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Barbara?
I'm with the well-spoken gentleman who preceded me. I'm a journalist, not a diplomat. I'm the one without ambassador before my name. So, you know, I can be blunt. I mean, I think the North Korean outreach was maybe the only thing that President Trump did that I liked. I thought it was worth a try. And, you know, I've written about this. I quoted a piece that Bruce Cummings wrote for The Nation. Bruce Cummings, you know, great University of Chicago historian of North Korea, who said that, you know, Trump, in his madness and his naivete, you know, being so untethered from diplomatic norms, you know, was the one to say, hey, let's just sit down and talk to North Korea. Why not? He wouldn't know why not. I mean, there were a lot of reasons why not. So I think having done it, he broke the ice, and I completely agree. We shouldn't throw things out. And I think from now on, there will maybe not be another U.S. Administration like the Trump administration. I dearly hope not. But he gave us that, and I think going forward, the taboo against just sitting down and talking has been broken. So good for Trump.
Okay, so let me move to the alliance issue. I think most of us believe that the alliance will be better under Biden administration. But as Ambassador Kim mentioned in his remarks, that's also from the audience as well, that Mr. Moon wants to complete this wartime operational control transfer during his tenure. But Mr. Biden may say it depends on condition in your world, not just by timing. And that could be also a possible source of friction between Seoul and Washington. So do you think this is a legitimate concern, or it's not much an issue? What's your view on that question?
Well, maybe I'll go first, okay? On this tough question. The real problem with wartime operational control, OPCON transfer, in Korea has become a big political issue between left and right, between those who want self-determination, sovereignty, and those who are more afraid of security issues in North Korea. In the US, it's 95% technical issue. And so it's a military issue. And so really, if you ask Biden or anyone in senior, what is this all about? They really don't know what it's about. Ultimately, what it's about is US military reluctance to put US military personnel and assets under Korean control. Imagine a situation, if there is a war contingency on the peninsula, there will be literally hundreds of thousands of US troops here, including nuclear submarines and maybe several aircraft carrier groups. Americans are simply not going to put them under a Korean commander who have not been used to doing it. Someone is saying that this is like putting Rolls Royce, to a kid who just passed the driving test. So that's the real concern. And so if you say, and so everyone says, okay, let it be condition-based, but that condition will never be satisfied. And that's the problem. As long as North Korea has nuclear weapons, South Korea does not have nuclear weapons, how can the threat situation change to meet that condition? So it's a tough issue. I completely agree with Ambassador Kim. As long as you define a transfer of OPCON base on condition base, it's not going to be met by the end of President Moon's term, as is the strongly stated goal of the South Korean government.
Well, I would be a little reserved, and I would be less pessimistic than Ambassador Yoon. Well, will that conditions be met? Will not be met forever? I disagree with that. There are three conditions. I would not repeat them, but those conditions may be met at some time in the future, but not now. I have met military personnel in Korea, both Korean military and defense people, as well as high-ranking US military officer in Korea quite recently. They are all agreed that it is premature to transfer this OPCON authority to Korea within the term of Moon Jae-in presidency. Well, we have only 1 year and a half until the end of President Moon's presidency, and it is well, I would say it is reckless. This may be, I agree, this is very politically thorny issue in Korea, but in the U.S. It is technical issue. I would add one thing. This is very militarily, strategically important issue in both Korea as well as in the United States. This is one of several very heavy issues that governs the security of Korean Peninsula.
Okay, Barbara, now you can reconcile between two ambassadors.
You know, I think I'm going to pass on this
Okay.
this question because it's not my area of expertise. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so I will now ask the final question, and once again, thank you so much for engaging so interesting way. So let's assume that we reconvene the same session 4 years later. Okay, so 2024, let's say November. And what issues do you think we will be still discussing, and what issues may be gone? It's just more for fun question, but it still might be important because I've been working on this North Korea alliance for last maybe 20 plus years. So we are always come back to square one all the time. So 4 years later will be different, or will be more or similar? Seriously, I mean.
Well, it depends on what issues. Well, 2024 is the 3rd year of a new Korean government. Korean people will elect a new president in May 2022. So it'll be well into 2 years. And I would say quite sure one thing is that we will still be speaking about the denuclearization issue. And the burden sharing, cost sharing issue will be already gone. But OPCON issue may remain. And depending upon the progress of U.S. North Korea negotiation or contact, whether overt or convert, I think the South-North relationship will be much on the agenda as well. If not, there's any bad military provocation from the North.
Thank you. I think so. 4 years' time, Kim Jong-un has waited very, very patiently for 4 years. So I think he'll be very happy to see Trump elected again in 2024.
Okay.
So
he better be patient then.
So he's looking forward to the summit. Thank you.
Barbara?
I am not going to go with that prediction. I really think it's time to say goodbye to Mr. Trump. But I do think, as I said before, some of what Trump has left us with will remain, that this taboo on direct negotiations will have vanished. And I think, direct talks will be the new normal. And I think that's a good thing. I saw this a bit in the Middle East. You had, with the talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians, it was started, by the by Yitzhak Rabin, but then the Likud government came in, and it just never went away. It became clear that you had to talk, and again, I think that will be maybe the best part of Trump's legacy. And it's strange; it's something he doesn't talk about. North Korea much as one of his accomplishments because he didn't do anything, but I do think he left us in a better place.
All right, thank you so much. I think we can continue, but we're gonna wrap up today's session. And thank you so much for your excellent presentation, very engaging discussions. Actually, I threw a lot of tough questions actually, and then I'm very happy to hear all the great points. And then also thanks to National Unification Council in San Francisco, especially President Mr. Choi. And then also thanks the audience joining us. And we got a lot of people joining us and a lot of good questions. So hopefully we can meet sometime in near future, and hopefully we don't have to repeat the same issue 4 years later. But thank you so much, and good night, and then good afternoon. So thank you.
Hello, I'm back. We really appreciate our speakers and participants for making this great forum. So now we will watch a Korean traditional performance video provided by Korean National Kugak Center. You will be able to read explanation of the performances as subtitles at the bottom of the video. Please enjoy them. This is the end of tonight's event. Before closing this event, I want to mention Ms. Juyeon Kang, a USSF member, for her translation service. Thank you for participating in this event, and I hope that you have enjoyed both forum and performances. You will receive a short survey about this event through email. Your comments will be appreciated and help for us prepare for the next events. Stay healthy and strong. Thank you and good night.